Perfect. So welcome to those of you who have arrived with us on time. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome you to our talk. Sonia Shipak is our speaker today, and I'm just going to give you a little introduction to her. So Sonia is the Heritage Development Coordinator for the Together Plan, based in Minsk in Belarus. With a deep commitment to preserving and promoting Jewish history and culture, Sonia plays a crucial role in the charity's mission to support Jewish communities. Her work involves extensive research into Belarus's Jewish heritage, contributing to notable projects such as the Together Plan's audio tours of Belarusian cities and their digital collection and our digital collection featured on Europeana, the EU-funded digital heritage platform. Additionally, Sonia has been integral to the development of a Jewish cultural heritage route in Belarus. Sonia coordinates Jewish heritage clubs in key cities, including Minsk, Gomel, Polotsk, and Mogilev, fostering cultural engagement and awareness among local populations. And since 2023, she has expanded her involvement to 13 cities across Belarus, leading collaborative projects and organizing events like exhibitions, lectures, and film screenings that celebrate and revive Jewish culture, which is all part of our work in the country. In the coming weeks, Sonia will be attending a training conference in Italy, along with me, alongside route managers working on European cultural routes under the Council of Europe's Cultural Routes Programme. This conference will focus on digital gamification modelling, an innovative approach aimed at encouraging broader public interest and participation in Jewish cultural heritage in Belarus and throughout Europe. So, without further ado, I'd like to hand the mic over, as they say, to Minsk in Belarus and to Sonia. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Let me share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, hi all, once again. It's wonderful to see all of you here, and many thanks for coming and supporting the Together Plan. To introduce myself, I'm Sonia Shipak, the Together Plan Heritage Coordinator based in Belarus and Minsk, and I'm involved in many different projects, as Deborah says. I joined the Together Plan team 3 years ago when I was still studying at the College of Linguistics, and I was initially a volunteer. And when I spent hours volunteering here, I immersed into the subject, and I was entrusted with implementation my own large projects, for example, Jewish Heritage Youth Clubs, audio tours, as also Deborah said to you. And we have a very small team, but we are all friends who help and support each other. The Together Plan and its projects have a really long history. The Together Plan has been working for 11 years, and the co-founders are Deborah Blumer from the UK and Artur Lifshitz from Belarus. The Together Plan promotes community capacity building through research, exploration, cultural events, and dialogue. We help communities discover what can be achieved together, working alongside members of the community to develop skills and knowledge. At the same time, we provide the necessary training to build a sustainable future. We launch a number of projects to preserve Jewish heritage and culture. And most of the information you will hear today is the result of that Together Plan's research for the Belarus Heritage Trail that we're working on now. When the Together Plan became a member of the APJ, its European Association for the Preservation and Promotion of Jewish Heritage and Culture, we started to build routes across Belarus that will allow local citizens to have involvement and also to promote tourism. The aim of this project is to provide a tool for travelers to discover the rich history of Jewish Belarus. The trail will enable visitors to find Jewish communities, cemeteries, memorials, museums, synagogues, yeshivas, and sites of interest. Most importantly, it will connect those in the diaspora to the homes they left behind, and also to give voice to the Jews of Belarus so that they can tell their stories and put Jewish Belarus on the world map. And one of the results of this project is audio tours of Jewish cities in Belarus on the Easy Travel platform. We already have 5 tours, one tour of Jewish streets of Minsk, one Jewish streets of Polsk, and 3 tours of Jewish Novogrudok, which are available on Easy Travel platform. Research with our historian in Minsk and heritage specialists in Novogrudok and Brest has enabled us to identify hundreds of different sites like buildings, cemeteries, memorials, and museums, all with Jewish provenance. Our team has been traveling across the country to photograph those sites, and in collaboration with the Jewish Heritage Network based in Amsterdam, our collection of over 1,600 digital assets are now being added to Europeana collection. It's an online platform for exploration of European digital cultural heritage. Another area of our work is the translation into English and publishing of books related to Jewish history and heritage. One of the latest books we presented this year was Anna Maciej's Testimonies and Tragedy and Resistance in the Minsk Ghetto. This is a very personal and detailed memoir of a survivor of the Minsk Ghetto, written in December 1943, almost immediately after ghetto liquidation. The Soviet narrative was that all Soviets suffered together and that there was no separate Jewish suffering. This is why Anna Maciej's memoir of what she witnessed in the Minsk ghetto was locked away in the archives, and it's only now available to be read because we translated and published this book. Another book is We Remember, Lest the World Forget, Memories of the Minsk Ghetto. This is a collection of memories from child survivors of the Minsk Ghetto. These are rare and moving personal testimonies, personal stories to the extraordinary power and resilience of the human spirit. Both books are available for sale on our website. Besides, we actively work with the youth and children. For the last 3 years, we have been actively developing youth Jewish heritage clubs, which operate in Gomin, Polotsk, Mogilov, and Minsk. Every week, young people and children gather to explore Jewish heritage and history through different lectures, quizzes, games, and so on. And each year, the number of participants grows and the topics becomes more interesting and diverse. As a charity working to revive Jewish community life in Belarus and building a Jewish heritage trail in the country, our mission is to tell the story of the Jewish Belarus. And we're giving a voice to the Jewish people in Belarus today and helping them to connect to their ancestry and to the present-day Jewish communities in Belarus. So our charity offers a fully custom professional archive service, and by providing people with the opportunity to search for their family records, we also learn more and more about the story of the Belarusian Jews, why they left, what professions they had, and where they lived. It also helps us to reach people who might be interested in supporting the work we do. But the most ambitious project so far is the Brest-Litovsk Jewish Cemetery. Over 80 years ago, more than 1,200 remnants of headstones that once stood in the Brest-Litovsk Jewish Cemetery were desecrated and used for other purposes. These headstones have been discovered over the last 20 years and will finally come home to rest in a stunning memorial. This memorial will be a testament to Brest's rich Jewish heritage, acknowledge and honor the community that was so brutally extinguished, and educate visitors about Brest's Jewish community of today. We ran an amazingly successful fundraising campaign, and now we are putting all our energies to building this memorial. And you've heard that we're implementing a number of interesting projects, and often people have a question: why Belarus? Why did so many Jews live here? And to answer these questions, you need to understand the historical background of this country. Belarus is a country with a rich historical heritage that was largely promoted by the Jewish population. The modern country of Belarus was formed only in 1991, but it can trace its origin to Slavic peoples who entered this area in the 6th, 8th centuries. While a distinctive Slavic ethnicity emerged early on, the territory of what today is called Belarus was historically not independent. It was ruled at first by various local principalities and later on, at different times, by Lithuania, Poland, and Russia. However, Jews are the oldest ethnic confessional population group of Belarus and its indigenous people. Although the first written evidence of Jewish community and its schools goes back to the years 1388, 1396, and it's considered that Jews appeared in Belarus during the 10th to 11th centuries. However, it was only in the 12th century, after the medieval crusades and increasingly difficult conditions in Germany, that a large influx of Ashkenazi Jews arrived into this area. They brought with them the Germanic-based Yiddish language, the traditions of Torah study, as well as urban skills from the German cities. The arrival of the Jewish merchants was a significant factor in the emergence of towns and cities. And wishing to develop their towns further and further, local nobility invited additional Jews along with other German merchants to strengthen local trade. As the towns grew, the Jewish community thrived. These Jews wouldn't develop a distinctive Belarusian Jewish identity, but rather be part of the emerging Lithuanian or Litvak culture. A new influx of Jews from Western Europe occurred between the 14th and 15th centuries. The Belarusian lands, as well as Ukrainian, Polish, and Russian, were at that time part of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. The expulsion of Jews from England and France, and also violent riots and persecutions in Germany taking place at that time, led to increasing numbers of Jews that migrated to the Grand Duchy of Lithuania and Poland. The next slide. Sorry. I have technical issue here.
That's all right. We'll hold on while you sort your technical issue. We'll take a moment. Don't worry.
Okay. Can you see the next map?
No, I thought that you hadn't moved it on. We're on the map with many arrows on at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Is it okay? Yeah.
Yes, we're on to the next slide.
Yeah. Finally, thanks. And let's back to Grand Duchy of Lithuania. And according to the laws of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, Jews were a class of free citizens under the patronage of the Grand Duke and local authorities. They lived in independent communities and had their own governance in their internal community. Jews moved into this region, as seen in increasing records of the presence of Jewish life in many towns and cities. Over this period, the Jewish community in the Grand Duchy of Lithuania sought and gradually received privileges from the Lithuanian rulers. At the same time, Poland and Lithuania were moving towards union. And in the 16th century, Poland, Lithuania, Ukraine, part of Russia, and Belarus became Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, which was one of the most important centers of Jewish Talmud education. Jews were a specific class of society with their internal governance by elected social and spiritual representatives. Jewish community affairs were managed by the kagals, it's a community council. Such councils would be found in all cities of Jewish settlement, except in some small towns and villages. Kagals paid a great deal of attention to and carried about the education process. But community leaders cared about strengthening the unity of the Jewish nation and developing their national identity. In the last quarter of the 18th century, Polish lands were annexed by her neighbors, dramatically changing the political landscape of present-day Belarus. The Second Partition of Poland in 1793 saw all of what is today Belarus become part of the Russian Empire. And during the 19th century, Minsk was one of the largest, most important communities in the Russian Empire. Jews in the Russian Empire were required to live in the so-called Pale of Settlement. This term, Pale, is derived from the Latin word palus, which translates as a stake, and means the area enclosed by a fence or boundary. In other words, it means ghetto. In this area, permanent residency by Jews was allowed, and beyond which Jewish residency, both temporary or permanent, was mostly forbidden. This was a territory of modern Belarus, Ukraine, and the Baltic states. The Pale came into being under the rule of Catherine the Great in 1791, initially as a measure to speed colonization of territory of the Black Sea. In addition to being obliged to live within this region, Jews were also prohibited from doing agricultural work. As a result, their economic opportunities were severely limited and coupled with a growth in population. This led to economic deterioration of this region. The dramatic westward expansion of the Russian Empire through the annexation of Polish-Lithuanian territory substantially increased the Jewish population. At its height, the Pale had a Jewish population of over 5 million and represented the largest component of the world's Jewish population at that time. And it's really, really hard to believe that from the middle of the 19th century until the beginning of the Second World War, Minsk was a predominantly Jewish city. Almost 52% of capital's population were Jews, and this was the city's largest community. But by the end of the 19th century, many Belarusian Jews were part of the general flight of Jews from Western Europe to the New World due to conflicts and anti-Semitism in the Russian Empire. Millions and millions of Jews, including tens of thousands of Jews from Belarus, immigrated to the United States of America and South Africa. The violence toward Jews spread across the Russian Empire, as you can see on the slide, and found their way to Belarus by 1906. After the establishment of the Soviet regime, some of Belarus became part of the Soviet Union and other parts fell under Polish control. Jewish community and religious life was silenced in Minsk, and the suppressed religious and national institutions were replaced by institutions of Jewish culture based on the Yiddish language and communist ideology. So Minsk became an important center of Jewish communist cultural activity in the Soviet Union. Moreover, until 1936, Yiddish was the state language of the Belarusian Soviet Republic, together with the Belarusian, Russian, and Polish languages. Although initially Jews rose to positions of importance and Yiddish was recognized, the Soviets shut down Jewish religious life. As a result, many Jews, especially the more religious, moved to Lithuania and Poland, which were not under Soviet control. Later, as Stalin developed an anti-Semitic policy, conditions for Jews deteriorated further and further. And despite this, Jewish community and Jewish life succeeded in maintaining much of its cultural richness throughout this period, and Minsk was recognized as the most Jewish city in the Soviet Union. In September 1939, the Soviet Union, following the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact with Nazi Germany, occupied Western Poland, and the former Polish territories referred to as West Belarus were incorporated in the Belarusian Soviet Republic. The annexation was internationally recognized only after the Second World War. The Nazi invasion of Belarus brought with it the Einsatzgruppen, who collaborated with local anti-Semites and went from town to town murdering the Jews. Large forests in the region offered some shelter, and some Jews managed to hide in the forests and use them as a base for resistance group. These, however, were exceptional cases, and some 66% of Belarusian Jews, over 800,000 people in number, were killed by the Nazis and their collaborators. And at the end of the war, the area again came under Soviet control. With most of the shtetls destroyed and the inhabitants murdered, what remained of Jewish life was now generally confined to larger urban areas. Post-war, Jewish life suffered under the Soviet policy. The activity of religious communities was practically stopped after the war. After the war, anti-Semitism escalated openly as a campaign against the ruthless cosmopolitan, in other words, against the Jews. In this campaign, many leading Jewish writers and artists were killed. Different terms like ruthless cosmopolitans, bourgeois cosmopolitans, individuals devoid of nation or tribe appeared in local newspapers and magazines. Victimization of Jews in the Soviet Union at the hands of the Nazis was denied, and Jewish scholars were removed from the science, and immigration's rights were denied to Jews. Communist anti-Semitism under Stalin shared a common characteristics with Nazi and fascist anti-Semitism in its belief in a Jewish world conspiracy. Anti-Semitism in the Soviet Union once again peaked during the rule of Leonid Brezhnev. Jewish immigration to Israel and the United States, which had been allowed in limited amounts under the rule of the previous leader, Khrushchev, once more became heavily restricted, primarily due to concerns that Jews were a security liability or treasonous. Would-be immigrants, or in other words, it means refuseniks, often require special invitation from a relative living abroad for the application to be even considered by the Soviet authorities. In addition, in order to immigrate, one needed a written permission from all immediate family members. The rules were often stretched in order to prevent Jews from leaving, and ability for appeal was rarely permitted. And after the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, there was a revival of Jewish life, with the appearance of many different religious, cultural, educational institutions, as well as community centers. But the majority of the former Soviet Union's Jewish population left for Israel and United States. And today in Belarus, according to the latest census, there are only about 12,000 Jews. But you should realize that these are official data, and in reality, these figures vary from 20 to 50,000 Jews. And you can see that almost nothing remains of the pre-war and even more so the pre-revolutionary Jewish heritage. All Jewish schools and synagogues were closed or converted into civilian facilities. However, if desired, traces of the Jewish presence can still be found, and I invite you to join me on a virtual tour of preserved sites of Jewish heritage in Minsk. And I think that the first point of our virtual route should be the place where I'm located now. It's the Dauman Street Synagogue. Before the October Revolution, in fact, there were 83 synagogues in Minsk, more than Orthodox and Catholic churches. And today, only a few of them have survived where Jewish services were once held. And this synagogue is one of them. Its story began when two Jewish businessmen, Perelman and Lubetsky, built a distillery in this area in 1907. 11 Jews worked at the distillery day and night, and the Jewish workers of the distillery equipped a small prayer hall in one of the distillery rooms and used it as a synagogue. The distillery had to be open on Shabbat, so the owners employed several non-Jews to work. The distillery didn't stop its operation during the whole of the First World War, and after the revolution in 1917, the factory became nationalized and was renamed as the Proletarian East Factory. During the war, the building wasn't damaged at all, and it was used for sewing production for the needs of the Reich, and then in the post-war years it housed a haberdashery factory, which later joined the Minsk sewing factory. In 1969, the enterprise was renamed as the Komsomolka Sewing Production Association. In the mid-1980s, an initiative group was formed in Minsk that aimed to revive Jewish life and Jewish culture in Minsk and appealed to the last leaders of the Belarusian Soviet Republic to return the building to the Jewish community of Minsk. And only in 1994, the Dauman Street Synagogue was handed over to the Jewish Religious Union, the chairman of which since last year has been Artur Lifshitz, the co-founder of the Together Plan. So that's why the headquarters of the Minsk office of the Together Plan can be considered this amazing building, which has a 100-year history. We are now actively engaged into the restoration and renovation of this synagogue and the revival of Jewish historical and cultural heritage. Last year, our team opened the Jewish Heritage Center, which hosts weekly different exhibitions, lectures, seminars, celebrations, film screenings, and even weddings. An interesting fact that our previous office was in an equally interesting location in terms of Jewish history and culture. A 10-minute walk from the Dauman Street Synagogue is the Trinity suburb. This suburb is located in the historic center of Minsk on the bank of the Svislich River. It's our, let's say, the largest river in the city. Its origin dates back to the 12th, 13th centuries, and initially it was used to be a trade and administrative center of Minsk with many different Jewish shops, workshops, and houses. And one of the examples is the house that belonged to the Jewish publicist and revolutionary Nathan Vigdorchik. This house is known in Minsk as an architectural monument even now, and it attracts lots of tourists every day. One more Jewish house is the rental house of the Jewish business owner Pinchusovich, built in the second half of the 19th century. He rented his cozy house as a soldier's barracks during the First World War, with separate comfortable rooms for officers. It was in this exactly building that our previous office was located. And only a few Minsk residents have heard that once this area, the entire Trinity suburb, was called Minsk Bathhouse. And there is explanation for this fact. Here were the famous night shelter baths of Jewish business owner Reines, which had been functioning since 1886. They were called night shelters because they stood right behind the city night shelter, and homeless people who had been walking around during the day in search of food and money came to the shelter closer to night. The ground floor was used as a common bathhouse with separate sections for men and women. On the first floor, there was a bathhouse for the nobility, also with male and female sections. Next to the Rhines baths, there were the oldest baths in Minsk, and the owner of them was businessman Plavsky, who wasn't Jewish, but this baths was the oldest one, and it was opened in the middle of the 19th century. Next to the Plavsky bathhouse, there was the Kozhdan baths, no less popular in the city. This concentration of baths in one place is due to the fact that it was the excellent location on the bank of the Svislich River from where the water was taken for usage. And some of the above-mentioned bathhouses in Minsk survived the Second World War and continued to operate for some time after its end. But one of the main and important sites of Trinity suburb is the Kitaevskaya synagogue that was located right in the middle of this suburb. Kitaevtsi is the local name for Hasidic Jews. The synagogue was the main prayer space for Jewish burghers. Burgher is the term that was used to refer to middle-class Jews here in Belarus. And the synagogue was built in 1874 as the main Jewish temple of the Minsk Hasidim. And this synagogue got its name from the name of its builder and owner, Boruch Kitaevsky. This synagogue at that time was the central place of prayer for the city's Jewish bourgeoisie, and a cheder and a kollel operated here at that synagogue. And after its closure in 1924, various Soviet institutions and offices were located here. During the war, it was partially destroyed and one of its walls was burned. However, the traditional appearance of the synagogue building of the late 19th and early 20th century has been preserved, and you can see on the slide how it looks like now. And in the 1980s, this building was reconstructed and adapted for the exhibition hall of the Museum of Nature and Ecology of the Republic of Belarus. In my presentation, I would also like to touch upon Jewish personalities who influenced the development of Minsk, its architectural image and culture. And one of such people is Joseph Langbard, or Joseph Langbard. He was a Soviet architect and an honored art worker of the Belarusian Soviet Republic. Joseph Langbard was one of the outstanding architects of Europe of the 20th century, whose artistic heritage had a significant influence on the development of modern architecture. His works have greatly influenced the shape of Minsk, and they are examples of Belarusian architecture. In Minsk, he designed the governmental house. You can see the top picture on the slide. Also, the State Opera and Ballet House, the building of the Academy of Science. Also, he reconstructed the main facade of the Yanka Kupala Theater, is the yellow building on the slide, and next to it is the House of Officers. Also, Joseph Langbard carried out a number of projects in Moscow, St. Petersburg, Kiev, Kharkov, and Odessa. But perhaps the most significant building created by him is the Opera and Ballet House. It was located, and it's now located, very close to the Trinity suburb. It's the only opera house in Belarus and the largest theater in the country. It was located near the demolished oldest Trinity Market, which was part of the Trinity suburb. This theater is an example of Soviet pre-war constructivism, and now it has the status of an architectural monument of national importance. During the Second World War, the theater building was damaged by bombing and looting, but reconstruction began almost immediately after Minsk liberation, and of course under the direction, of course, of Joseph Langbard. And we can say that thanks to his hands, the architectural image of Minsk was created. Literally on every central street of Minsk, you can find a building that was constructed by Joseph Langbard. Jews were also responsible for the economic development of Minsk. One of the most important and popular streets among young people now is the Zybitskaya Street. And only 100 years ago, this street had a completely different character. Zybitskaya Street was often called the Tobacco Street of Minsk, as it was home to two tobacco factories. The tobacco factory of the Jewish business owner Harlib was opened in 1870. It produced different cigars, cigarettes, papyrus, and smoking tobacco. In 1895, it employed 80 employees, and half of them were Jews. Almost in the next building was the tobacco factory of Jewish merchant Ginsburg, which started operating in 1890 and specialized in the production of tobacco powder. The owners of Minsk tobacco factories tried to coordinate among themselves the production and sale of different varieties of cigarettes, tobacco on the local market and to work in tandem. But the city tobacco street was located near Nemiga Street. This street is one of the oldest streets in Minsk, and it appeared in the 12th century. Actually, the first mention of city of Minsk is connected with this street. Already from the second half of the 16th century, Nemiga became a Jewish street and then a central trade street. By the beginning of the 20th century, the street was built up with two-story stone houses in Baroque and Classicist style, with numerous arcs and gates, thus creating a continuous street corridor. You can see example on the slide. It's an archive photo depicting these different houses, Jewish houses, and different small shops that were located on Nemiga Street. But the heart of Jewish Minsk and Nemiga Street was the so-called Shkolny Dvor. In English, it means school yard. It was a quarter on the corner of Nemiga Street. Actually, there were no educational institutions there, and until the beginning of the 20th century, the word school was used to refer to synagogues, because in Yiddish it means shul. And this is where the names Shkolna Street, Shkolny Dvor, and in English, School Street, Schoolyard came from. And the schoolyard was the heartbeat of Jewish life in Minsk. It was not only a place for praying and studying the wisdom of the Torah, it was here that important public and social issues were solved, and the latest news among the Jews were discussed. People came here to find a safe place to hide when they felt the disaster was approaching during the Holocaust. There were 14 synagogues and prayer houses in this area. And the main synagogue in the schoolyard was the Colt Synagogue. This synagogue was actually the first stone construction in Minsk, which was built in 1560. In 1573, the synagogue was opened, but in fact it had been a functioning Jewish prayer temple since 1565. The synagogue wasn't heated, that's why it was called the Cold Synagogue. In 1685, The first official Talmud school in Minsk was founded at this exactly building, at this exactly synagogue. So students from all over the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth came to Minsk in order to study Torah. The old synagogue stood on the Belarusian lands for more than 400 years, but it functioned directly as a synagogue with great breaks, because the building was handed over to the Orthodox and Catholic churches. And until it was completely closed by the Soviet authorities in 1924. The building wasn't damaged during the war, and in 1945, at the request of Minsk Jews, the old synagogue was reopened and operated as a synagogue for another 20 years after the war. In 1965, the old synagogue was considered to be inappropriate for the architectural appearance of the street. The Soviets tried to demolish the synagogue piece by piece, but it survived, and after which they decided to blow it up with the help of the dynamite, and in 1969 it was destroyed. Only the foundation of the synagogue remained, which was also blown up in the mid-90s. And as you can see, the synagogue survived the revolution and the Second World War, but didn't survive the anti-Semitic views of the Soviet authorities. The Jewish artist Maya Danzig managed to capture the way it was well preserved in his painting, My City Ancient, New. At that time of drawing his painting, the synagogue had already been demolished, so he recreated from his memory. While in reality, Minsk renovators and different architects and authority were destroying architectural monuments, Maya Danzig was carefully preserving them in his paintings. And according to his paintings, it's even possible to conduct city tours, remembering the past and describing the present. And this exactly painting is a kind of art historical monument of Minsk, which increasingly appears on the streets of our city in different forms, like in different billboards, posters, and stickers. And this painting is really popular among the youngsters. And one of the such billboards is located right in the center of the Rakovsky suburb, which is located right behind Nemiga Street. This suburb is one of the oldest historical districts in Minsk. Just imagine, its construction began in the distant 11th century. However, the final architectural appearance of the Minsk landmark was formed by the 17th century. At that time, the suburb was inhabited by local Jews, traders, and craftsmen. And in the second half of the 19th century, this suburb turned into a working street of Jewish people who worked in small Jewish enterprises, factories, and workshops, but it was still distinguished by colorful and interesting buildings with cozy courtyards. In these old courtyards of factory buildings, the outline of Jewish wooden houses can still be seen, and you can see some examples of preserved houses on the slide. And in one of these old Minsk houses of the old Rakovsky suburb, in 1884, in a poor family of Yakov and Sarah Meyer, was born Lazar Meyer, the founder of the largest film studio in Hollywood, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, and the American Film Academy, who became widely known as the Great Louis Bart Meyer. The legendary name of this film producer is associated with the golden age of Hollywood and its famous film studio, the leader of world cinema for many years. However, in all possibility, not every American knows that the founder of the American film studio, Film Empire, and one of the most influential Americans of the 20th century, was born here in Minsk, and his real name is Lazar Meyer. But let's return to the Rakovsky suburb. And among the surviving pearls of this neighborhood is the house with mezuzah. The so-called house with mezuzah was built in the Rakowski suburb at the turn of the 19th and 20th centuries. This house was given its name because at the entrance on the right side there was a trace of a mezuzah. Mezuzah is a piece of parchment inscribed with a specific Hebrew text from the Torah, which Jews fix to the doorposts of their houses. This indicated that there was a Jewish family living in this house. And today we know that this house belonged to the family of the owner of the distillery, which is now the Dalmana Street Synagogue, which I told you about at the very beginning of my presentation. And in 2001, during the renovation of this house, some documents like protocol, order, and verdict on violation of the rules of conspiracy were found in this house, and these documents dated back to 1926. These documents belong to the Jewish Zionist organization called Young Guardian, which had been illegal in the Soviet Union since 1923. So we can guess that this house was the headquarters of this Zionist organization. And in this house with the mezuzah, the original brickwork has been preserved to these days, and the wooden doorposts with the mezuzah mark have been replaced as a result of renovation and transferred to the Museum of Jewish History and Culture of Belarus. Also, in the Rakovsky suburb, there were a synagogue and a yeshiva. In 1888, a high Jewish spiritual school was opened, and it was called Central Yeshiva Gdola do Minsk, or Большая Minska. This yeshiva was moved here from the called synagogue. The yeshiva was headed by the chief rabbi of Minsk, Yerachim Yehuda Leib Perelman, who was a native of Brest-Litovsk. This yeshiva educated no less than 160 rabbis annually. This yeshiva was officially closed by the Soviet authorities in 1921, but almost immediately the House of Jewish Celebrations was opened here instead of Central Yeshiva. This building of the former Central Yeshiva has survived to this day, and you can see how it looks like now. But the oldest building in the Rakovsky suburb is the synagogue. The synagogue was built by the Jewish merchant Zaltzman in 1864 for the Jewish poor of the suburb. Until the October Revolution in 1917, a religious school, a cheder, operated in this synagogue. But this synagogue was closed in 1921, and a few years later the building was reconstructed and the first floor was added to this building. In 1925, one of the first cinemas of the city was located here in this building. During the Nazi occupation, this building of the former Salzman synagogue housed a German commandment office, a cinema, a buffet, and restrooms for the policemen and Germans of the Minsk ghetto who just came here to watch movies, have a snack, a drink, and just take their minds off the crimes which they committed every day in the Minsk ghetto. And the most terrible pages in the history of the Rakovsky suburb and Minsk is the years of Nazi occupation, when this part of the city became the core of one of the largest Jewish ghettos in Europe. On 39 streets and lanes surrounded by barbed wire, the heavily guarded, there were more than 100,000 prisoners from Minsk and its suburbs, as well as 35,000 Jews deported from 7 European countries. And on the slide, you can see the map of the Minsk ghetto and some streets that I've told you about earlier, like Nemiga Street. It was the border of the Minsk ghetto. In some streets like Vitebsk Street, Khlebny Lane, Shpalerная Street, they were part of the Rakovsky suburb, and even now they're part of the Rakovsky suburb. The ghetto was created on 28th of June 1941, soon after the German invasion of the Soviet Union and capture of Minsk. On the fifth day after the occupation, 2,000 Jewish people were massacred by the Germans, and from then on, murders of Jews became a common occurrence here. About 20,000 Jews were murdered within the first few months of the German occupation, mostly by the Einsatz squads. And as in many other ghettos, Jews were forced to work in factories or other German-run operations. Ghetto inhabitants lived in extremely poor conditions with insufficient stock of food and medical supplies. Jews couldn't leave the ghetto territory on their own, only as part of work columns, and they had to wear special identification patches on their clothes. In Yiddish, they called them lata, or latte in plurals. These patches refer to the pieces of yellow fabric which Jews in the Minsk ghetto were ordered to wear. The order applied to everyone over the age of 10, and the patches were attached on both the left side of the chest and on the back. In the Minsk ghetto, the latter were round in shape, although in other ghettos they were shaped like stars of David. And according to one theory, the reason for this is that there were so many prisoners in the Minsk ghetto, so they didn't have time to make star-shaped latte for every prisoner. In November 1941, a second ghetto was established in Minsk for Jews deported from the West, known as Ghetto Hamburg, which adjoined the main Minsk ghetto. Above the entrance to this separate ghetto was a sign, Sonderghetto, or Special Ghetto. This ghetto was divided into 5 sections according to the places from which the inhabitants came: Hamburg, Berlin, the Rhineland, Bremen, and Vienna. Little contact was permitted between the inhabitants of the Minsk ghetto and the Sonderghetto. Moreover, the deported Jews didn't trust the Belarusians because they spoke a different language, and they rather trusted the Nazis, who spoke German and whom they understood. In 2008, in Minsk, not far from the Rakovsky suburb, the Jewish Memorial Park was opened. This is a site that was previously Jewish cemetery, which existed from 1868 to 1946. And during the ghetto period, it was a place of execution where more than 5,000 Jews were shot here. Memorial signs were erected in the park to commemorate the Jews from different European cities and countries who were exterminated on the Belarusian land during the war. Also on the slide you can see some examples of the matzevas that are also part of the exhibition of this Jewish Memorial Park. In March 1942, approximately 5,000 Jews, including 200 orphans from a boarding school together with their teachers and medical staff, were killed nearby where the pit, or in Russian, Yama, memorial to the Minsk ghetto now stands. Thousands of bodies of those who were killed in the Minsk ghetto were dumped into the pit that today is marked with an impressive memorial. In the center of the memorial, there is a black marble obelisk erected in 1947. The stairs lead to the deep pit from the Last Journey sculpture that features 27 bronze figures moving down the stairs. When the reconstruction of the memorial was undertaken, No machinery, in fact, was used, and all the work was done by hand. This process, which took 8 years to complete this memorial. By August 1943, fewer than 9,000 Jews were left in the ghetto. And according to the German official data, and the ghetto was liquidated on 21st of October 1943, with many Minsk Jews perishing in the Sobibor extermination camp. Several thousands were massacred at Maltrostinets extermination camp. Before the war, this area, Maltrostinets, was just a village a few miles to the east of Minsk. Trostinets was the largest Nazi extermination camp on the territory of the Soviet Union and the fourth largest in Europe following the infamous Auschwitz, Majdanek, and Treblinka. According to the official data, around 200,000 people were killed in this so-called death factory. There is also evidence that the actual number of victims is much, much higher. Trostinets comprised several places of mass killings: the labor camp near the village of Maltrostinets, Blagovshchina, where mass executions were carried out, and also Shashkovka, where bodies were burned in a huge peat oven. In 1963, an obelisk with internal flame was erected on the site of the former death camp to commemorate the victims of Trostinets. In 1965, a monument was erected on the site of the burning of 6,000 prisoners of the Maltrostinets. In the same year, a monument was erected on the site of the cremation pit, where about 50,000 people were exterminated. And all monuments and obelisks were combined into one memorial complex only in June 2015. And you can see some of the obelisks and memorials of this complex on the slide, but it's just a small part of them. And only a few dozen people, few dozen prisoners of the Minsk ghetto survived until the liberation of the Belarusian capital from the Nazis. And Frida Reisman escaped the Minsk ghetto as a child. Frida has never left Minsk, and it was only after the fall of communism she was able to start telling the stories of the Minsk ghetto. She was saved and hidden by the righteous among the nations in the village of Porechye, but Frida was in the ghetto and she saw the horrors of the Holocaust with her own eyes. She lived right in the heart of the Rakovsky suburb, in one of the houses that was on the slide. And I suggest you to watch this short video memoir of this house where she lived with her family.
Вот последний балкон на втором этаже. Это была квартирка папиной тети, моей бабушки, сестра. Здесь она жила с семьей. И до первого погрома мы жили вот здесь, в этом доме. И когда начался погром, я не могу понять, почему, где я была, почему я оказалась с папой, почему мама отдельно с ними была. Братья спрятались, вот здесь черный ход был, и были какие-то навалом доски лежали. Вот они здесь спрятались под этими досками, братья. А я оказалась с папой. И нас, как говорится, привели к колонии. Мама оказалась в колонну.
То есть братья спрятались в доме, маму забрали в колонну,
да, и
а вы с
все
папой были
родные погибли. Вот сколько я приходила сюда, ну, рассказывала все, что где я жила. И ко мне спустился охранник однажды. И когда он узнал, почему я прихожу, он меня пригласил туда, зайдите. Я не могу подняться. Я туда ни разу не заходила. Ни разу я не могу подняться. Я смотрю на этот балкон.
Это вот этот балкон?
Да, я смотрю на эти окна. Хоть я вспомню их, никто не остался.
So much of Minsk was destroyed and rebuilt for decades after the war. Many buildings were preserved and then reconstructed also. And I suggest you to take one more look at a few places that have survived to this day. In the middle of the 19th century, the Volunteer Firefighting Society of Minsk was formed. Right after its creation, the society built a fire station on the other side of its public plaza due to frequent fires and entire streets burning down from minor mishaps. The majority of the city's population at that time were Jewish, so were most of the firefighters. Therefore, the Jewish community paid for the construction of the fire station, which opened on the 21st of January, 1885. The fire station building has survived intact, and today it's the Museum of Firefighting. It introduces visitors to the local history of firefighting traditions and equipment, as well as its firefighting heroes. It also shares rare and archived photos and archived documents covering the largest fires in the history of Minsk. But before reaching, I would say, the pearl of the pre-war Minsk, you can notice the long four-story building. In 1879, a four-grade Jewish vocational school was founded here. However, the doors of this large, for that time, educational institution opened to Jewish youth only in 1882. It had about 300 students studying over 30 different specialties, without which social and daily life would be even impossible. Here, future medical workers, pharmacists, locksmiths, blacksmiths, carpenters, printers, and others mastered their professions. The only exception was the so-called sacred Christian work. It means the work of making ritual objects. In 1914, the vocational school had to reduce its number of students and classrooms because the private dental school of two highly respected doctors, Dr. Lev Shapiro and then dentist Abram Demichovsky, moved into this building. So the first entrance of the building led to the vocational school, and the second one to the dental school of Shapiro and Demichovsky. But now I want to tell you about one of the most well-known places for the Jews of Minsk. It was the Great Choral Synagogue, which is located 10 minutes walk from the Rakovsky suburb. Its story begins in 1901 with its construction lasting 5 years. The Minsk Jewish doctor Joseph Luns initiated this project, leading the fundraising for the construction of a Jewish temple in Minsk. The Great Choral Synagogue opened its doors to Jews in 1906. Yeshiva, a cheder, kollel, a school of cantors, music and theater studios operated within this Great Choral Synagogue. This synagogue was even often visited by famous people. For example, in 1913, the outstanding Jewish writer Shalom Aleichem visited this Great Choral Synagogue. Also, Russian writer Yevgeny Chirikov sketched one of his best plays under the title The Jews, but this play unfortunately was forbidden to be staged in the Soviet Union. The purpose of this synagogue changed in 1921. It became a Jewish theater, and then in 1923, a workers' club. This club was reorganized into a house of culture, which was later leased to the enterprise of Belgoskino. In English, it means Belarusian State Cinema, and it housed one of the largest cinemas in the Soviet Union, called Kultura, or in English, Culture. During the Great Patriotic War, the choral synagogue sustained damage in a fire, and during the subsequent renovation, it was so modified that the result bore no resemblance to its original appearance. Only the side facades of the synagogue were left untouched by the renovation, and can still be observed by looking into its inner courtyard. And you can see these walls on the slide. And now, in this former Great Choral Synagogue, the National Drama Theatre of the Republic of Belarus is located. But the first and only dental school in the northwestern corner of the Russian Empire was opened also here next to the Great Choral Synagogue, and it was opened in 1907 by Dr. Lev Shapiro and Abram Demichovsky. Notably, according to the laws of that time, higher educational institutions in the northwestern corner of the Russian Empire shouldn't have existed, as the Russian Empire authorities feared progressive-minded youth. At that time, the educational expertise of dental specialists in the Belarusian province was extremely low, and this sparked the initiative of Dr. Lev Shapiro and dentist Abram Demichovsky, who offered to open a dental school in Minsk to the provincial authorities. Students of both genders and at least 17 years old enrolled into this school. And by the beginning of its first academic year, over 50 applications had been submitted by prospective Jewish youth. A year later, a second dental school that was of Minsk dentist Raphael Kaplan also began to operate here in this building, with both schools prominently attended by Jewish youth, as I have said. And in 1909, the schools merged into the Minsk Dental School for 130 students, operating a free dental clinic. And then this school moved to the Jewish Vocational School and to this building that I've shown you earlier. Another street and place connected with Jewish history and heritage that cannot be omitted is Karl Marx Street. On this street were the Bristol Hotel of the Jewish businessman Jerusalemchik with 14 rooms, and also the advertising agency of Jewish printer Neiman. But only few know of the pre-war building of the Minsk Philharmonic located here. And surprisingly, before the Second World War, Minsk was the jazz center of the Soviet Union. Eddie Rosner, the German Jewish jazz performer, trumpeter, arranger, and conductor, one of the greatest musicians of the 20th century, lived and worked in Minsk. For 7 years, he led the first and unfortunately last of Belarus state jazz orchestras by European standards. Rosner was the first jazz musician in Soviet history to be awarded the title of Honored Artist of the Belarusian Soviet Republic. He was nicknamed the White Louis Armstrong and the second trumpet of the world, back in the early 30s, becoming an iconic figure of the entire Soviet music scene. Eddie Rosner's first concert in Minsk was held in October 1939, and within a year, he led the Belarusian Republican Jazz Orchestra. Minsk marveled, relishing in Rosner's jazz. His orchestra played in liberated Minsk in 1944, as well as for Stalin in Sochi in 1945. With such success, rumors spread that Eddie played a trumpet made of solid gold. However, in 1946, jazz was banned in the Soviet Union, and Eddie was forced to leave first for Moscow and then for Germany. His emigration resulted in a ban on his name and on any mention of him. Eddie Rosner never took his rightful place among major cultural figures, and today he is known only to a small circle of jazz fans. And I offer you to relish a fragment from the film Concert Vice, in which you can see Eddie Rosner and the Belarusian State Orchestra, Jazz Orchestra performing. This video isn't so long, and I suggest you to watch and listen to it in full to pay tribute to Eddie Rosner and his talent, which never got Soviet and world recognition. So sit back and enjoy. So, you see that the Jewish history of Minsk still has a huge number of amazing facts, amazing stories, personalities that can be revealed for hours and hours. So many significant events that influenced the course of history took place here in Minsk that it's impossible to count them all. And in my presentation, I have told you only a small part of it, especially if we take into account that I focused mainly on the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, and very little on the events of the Holocaust and the Second World War. On the 2nd of March 2025, I'll be running another Zoom meeting, The Streets of Jewish Minsk, A Journey Through History, Part 2, where I will reveal to you even more amazing stories, personalities, and hidden facts. So save the date, and in the meantime, you can join for our upcoming events, which you can find out more on our website, or you can sign up for our mailing list to receive the latest news, event invitations, and amazing stories from our communities. And we ask you, of course, to support us, our charity, and our projects, because only together we can make this history come alive once again. So please subscribe us, follow, and support. So I really hope you were able to discover something new and interesting for you. Thank you for your attention and support. And now you can ask your questions, and my colleagues Zabra Brunner and Vasily Zaitsev will help me to answer them. Thank you once again.
Sonia, thank you so much for your incredibly informative talk. I hope that you all enjoyed. Please feel free to unmute, and if you have any questions, we will endeavour to answer them for you. Sonia, do you want to take your screen sharing off now so we can see everyone? Yeah.
Hi, Deborah. It's Neil.
Hey.
First, I'd just like to say thank you, Sonia. That was a brilliant presentation. I learned a lot. It was really, really well done. I mean, I've been to quite a few sort of ghetto sites and sort of former Jewish quarters in various cities, and it always sort of, I think shock's the wrong word. But it sort of shocks me how understated the Jewish history is in many cities like Minsk, Vilnius, and so on. And you could be in some of these cities, and unless you had some sort of local knowledge, you'd literally not notice or not know about the Jewish history unless you sort of looked very hard. So I mean, it's more of a comment than a question, really. It's just basically to say, I think that's one reason why this sort of presentation and this idea about the cultural heritage route and so on in through Belarus is so important. Getting that sort of history out there and sort of shining a light on it. So basically, yeah, it's just to say thanks for a really useful and informative presentation.
Thank you for your feedback.
Yeah, Neil, just to add to that, just to say that Neil is a supporter of the Together Plan and follows a lot of what we do and has actually written for us as well. And so one of our sort of big goals is to literally map and research and mark ultimately these buildings. At the moment, if you walk through the streets of Minsk, there's very little marked. And it is through our audio tours and the research that we are doing that we are discovering all of this. And it really all comes together, and literally we're just focusing on Minsk in this presentation, but you can take this and replicate it across every village really of Belarus. And another piece of the work that we do is we help people, as we mentioned, we help people find records in the Belarus archives, which of course informs a lot of our research. And it is unbelievable. I mean, it really is an unbelievable deep dive. And as Neil has said, it focuses a light on something that so many people just don't know. Even in Belarus, they don't know it. So thank you for that. It's important. Penelope, yes.
Yeah. Thank you. It's Penny, but I'm fairly new to the Together Plan, and I've actually got an application in for help to find, if possible, which seems highly unlikely, but nonetheless, documents. I am doing family research, and only recently, in the last 18 months, have I been able to find where my Eastern European ancestors came from. For a long time, I thought it was possibly in the Ukraine area because they came to the UK as a result of pogroms. But actually, I've subsequently found out they came from Minsk, hence my interest in Minsk. I myself wasn't brought up Jewish in that sense. I was brought up Catholic through my mother, but my ancestry, which is what I'm particularly interested in, is the Jewish ancestry that came from Minsk. So kind of a couple of questions. Looking at the information, very small information from Frida Riesman and where she was located. I know it was part of the Minsk ghetto, but it would be interesting to know what kind of housing people lived in at the time of the turn of the century. In the Minsk area, what if, in effect, newly married couples could afford. I am writing the story of my family, but at the moment I'm having to kind of, in a way, make up aspects of what their life might have been like in Minsk prior to them coming across to the UK, which I believe was in 1906. My Auntie Betsy, as I knew her, who in fact is my father's mother, was only just under 3 years old when she came. But her mother and father, I wasn't even sure that her mother actually had come with them, but subsequently, I know she had children in Leeds, and also, unfortunately, she ended up in a asylum, a mental asylum in Yorkshire, and died in the asylum. And that's another aspect of the story, because from the medical notes I was able to get and pay for, but get of her time in the asylum, it looks like she was in an asylum in Russia, presumably in the Minsk area, at the age of 22 for 6 weeks. So I'm also now interested to know of any establishments of that time where people may either have been placed there or paid for people to be placed there, and in what circumstances they may be placed there, even only for 6 weeks. So in that bigger picture of this sort of broad understanding of Minsk, some of which I knew from having done research about the history of Minsk that you can get hold of. Some is, in fact, from that document that I got from your society anyway, that was written by somebody, which is how I found you in the first place, and there was a small video. There's a lot more in-depth stuff that one would like to try and get access to, but I have no idea how you go about it other than through your organization, charity, and then sort of paying for an archivist in Belarus to help you see if it's even possible. I mean, I have no other information than I think my great-grandfather was, or his father in 1847 was born in the Losh area of Minsk. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's a village. I don't know where these places exist. So, yeah, well, so I will be sorry. Yes, sorry.
Yeah, hi, Penelope. Hi, everyone. Sonia, well done. Great presentation. So if I may to step in, because Penelope's questions, I guess, refer to my department. I'm Vasily, and I coordinate archive services we provide at the Together Plan. So I've got your request and your message, what I'm looking for, but I still think like there are some details we should underline and clarify. And I guess it would be the best point not to lose anything important if we have like a separate Zoom or chit-chat, maybe in some WhatsApp or via email, if you can compose like in details, once again, what you told us here. So we can, I need my archive team to be involved because I'm not an archivist myself. So, and they will be able to answer you with more details than I do. But even from scratch, I can say that there are some information about especially Minsk, like maps, how people lived, how many people lived in houses that you asked in the beginning. And as you asked about your personal story, about your ancestors that moved around early 20th century, we have lots of we've done lots of searches on Minsk, and most of them are successful because Minsk was always a really bushing place with lots of big Jewish communities living there. So just combine all the points you want to be answered and send it. I'll put my email in the chat. Yeah. Or you should contact the Together Plan archive services. I'll put this.
I have, and I've put in a form.
Yeah. Already. Okay.
And I requested 2 documents, but since then I've found more information about my great-grandmother in terms of the fact that she had been in an institution as a young lady, and I wouldn't have thought to request that because I didn't even know that that was the case. The other thing is, I understand quite a lot of documents that might be available are all going to be in Russian. Do you tend to translate them, or?
Yeah, we always translate all identified records into English.
Right.
It's senseless to provide records in Russian. It's the same as you provide it to you in Chinese or Spanish.
So I've just put the email that you should send all that information to, and say that you were at this talk and ask for it to be sent to Vasily.
Yeah, so and I have to warn you a little bit that at the moment we have
Oh,
a
don't.
big demand for our services, and it may take some time to take your case into work.
Yeah, yeah. I've been doing the research for a while, and I
Mhm.
keep finding new bits which are like pieces of
Okay, so you understand that archive
Yeah,
work,
it's a
Just ask one
puzzle.
it
final
takes
question.
time.
Sorry, can I just ask one final question? Is it common for children to have birth, or was it common? I'm not saying today. Was it common for children to have birth certificates? Was it expected? So in the UK, it's the law, you have to have a birth certificate. But was that the case in 1901, 1903?
So there were specific register books of synagogues or Jewish communities where they recorded such points as death, birth, marriage, and divorce.
Right.
So, and each Jewish community had their own book at the synagogue. So,
and you'd be expected to register with them as a family, would you?
Repeat, please.
Would you? So the parents would, when they married, for instance, they would get married through a synagogue, and then they'd be expected.
They will be indicated.
And right. As children are born, and would it also show if children are born and died, for instance, deaths registered in the same way, like in a parish in the UK, what we call parish registers. Yeah.
No, there are like separate books for births, for deaths, etc.
But through the synagogue.
Yeah, but through the synagogue.
Thank you. Every little helps.
Absolutely, absolutely.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I'll send you an email, Deborah.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
One, and you can pass it on.
Perfect. Perfect. Are there any other questions that we can answer?
I just want to comment on Sonia's talk. It's the second time I attend such talk about Minsk history, and to be honest, the previous time I learned lots of things about my native city, a city where I have been living for 29 years already, and stories about many cities in our downtown in the very middle of Minsk that I pass by like almost every day, and they have such a great story behind them. You know, on this video with Frida Reisman, this two-story building with a balcony on the second story with pin walls, I cannot pass across this building without thinking about Frida's story now. And you know, it's so great that you don't only enjoy fascinating views of your town, but you feel its soul.
Yeah, very nicely put, Vasily.
So, and that's why Belarusians should attend such talks too.
And that's the point. Well said, well said. It's very nice to have Marcia on. Marcia was involved with our Brest project, which is ongoing at the moment. So if any of you here are not subscribing to our newsletter and you want to know more about these talks and also about the progress of the Brest project, which is now in construction, and all the other things that we do, so, you know, please subscribe, it's free. You can do it through the website, or you can just send us an email and we'll subscribe you, but you get access to all sorts of interesting things that otherwise you wouldn't do. As Sonia said, that we do have some great talks coming up with that we're organising, but also we work in partnership with an organisation called Kesha, and I'm giving a talk with Artur, who is my co-founder, who's based in Minsk, works with Vasily and Sonia, and we are doing that. If you're interested specifically in the Minsk ghetto, we're talking about the book We Remember Lest the World Forget, Memories from the Minsk Ghetto. So that's going to be on December the 10th, and I'll just put that in the chat. So if you're interested, you can come and hear us talking about that book and how it came to life, and some of the stories stories that we translated and published in that book, which are extremely moving, including Frida's story. As Sonia said, these were stories of child survivors of the Minsk ghetto, but written in old age, because they couldn't talk about what happened to them during the Soviet years. So this is another reason why these books are incredibly important and really would have never seen the light of day, and inform more about the history of the Jews of Belarus. And we have other books currently being translated for publication as I speak. So with that ado, we are bang on time. I'm going to let you go. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for being with us. Stay connected, come to our events, and we look forward to continuing the conversation with all of you. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you, Sonia.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Take
Bye
care.
all. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Deborah, Sonia, everyone.
Absolute pleasure. Lovely to see you. Come again.
Will do.
Take care.
See you.
Bye.
Teleportation.